Hello. Welcome everyone at the second panel of our conference, Exposing Crimes is Not a Crime, the Real-World Consequences of WikiLeaks. And today we focus on the discourse of war and military with the really great people that then you are going to see on stage. This topic is very important in the history of WikiLeaks, as we will see. Has been important also thanks to the activity of sources and whistleblowers, like, for example, Chelsea Manning, that has been very crucial for the release of WikiLeaks in this field. WikiLeaks, of course, started already before on this subject from 2007 with the US military equipment in Afghanistan and Iraq, but then in 2010, we have the publishing on collateral murder and the Afghan war logs and then Iraq war logs. And so we really have to say that thanks to Chelsea Manning, a lot of people learn what it means to face a war crime. And of course, thanks to the work of WikiLeaks that publish the documents. And I also hope that the discussion of today will bring us in understanding better the presence of wars, because since 4 years we have been witnessing many wars from Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, and also Iran. And of course there is a lot to say what is still that WikiLeaks can teach us in understanding what is happening in the geopolitical context. So I feel also to say that we as the Disruption Network Club, we have a lot of gratitude for whistleblowers that in the field of warfare did a very important act of courage to tell the truth in the field of criminal action in the context of war. And I want to say that, of course, we have to thank Daniel Ellsberg, but also other whistleblowers that were with us at the Disruption Network Club since the beginning. Our first conference in 2015 invited as keynote Brandon Bryant, and many whistleblowers of the US drone program have also been with us, like Cian Westmoreland. We also spoke a lot about Daniel Hale at the Disruption Network Club. We invited also Reality Winner, and so we also have to thank Heather Linebaugh that we saw in the wonderful film of Sonia Kennebeck for the action that also she did in exposing war crimes. And today also we will have two whistleblowers in our panel, Lisa Ling and John Kiriakou, together with other great speakers that then our moderator will introduce. And I'm happy now to introduce our moderator, Michael Sontheimer. He's a German journalist and also historian, one of the founders of the daily newspaper Taz, die Tageszeitung. And he has been reporting on the Assange case since 2010 and played a key role at the Spiegel in 2012 for publishing the WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden documents. So I'm very happy to introduce here Michael Sontheimer, and he will introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks a lot. I just introduce shortly my panelistas, as I call them. And I have to my right, to your left, I have Lisa Ling, who started to work for the US military in the early 90s as a medical surgical technician and nurse. She transferred to the Air Force Combat Communication, where she participated in operation, maintenance, and security of network communication systems. As networks grew in size, and complexity, her unit was moved and assimilated into the drone program. After her military service, Lisa Ling traveled to Afghanistan to see firsthand the effects and the consequences of US drone programs and targeted killings on civilians, of programs she participated in. And to my left, we have Jesselyn Radack. Jesselyn Radack, if you are somehow interested in whistleblower, you should know her, to be honest. I've seen her on many conferences in Europe in the last years. She heads the Whistleblower and Source Protection Program at ExposeFacts, and her work focuses on the issue of secrecy, surveillance, torture, and drones, where she has been at the forefront of challenging the US government's war on whistleblowers. Among her clients are nationally security and intelligence community employees who have been investigated, charged, or prosecuted under the Espionage Act, including Daniel Hale, Edward Snowden, Thomas Drake, whom I've seen here just a few minutes ago, and John Kiriakou. She served on the DC Bar Legal Ethics Committee and worked at the Justice Department for 7 years, first as a trial attorney and later as a legal ethics advisor. We don't talk about prizes. Everybody of us has won some prizes during our long. So I just come to John Goetz, who's on my left. We should admit that we worked together at Der Spiegel. John was there in around 2010, the WikiLeaks year. 2010 is for me the WikiLeaks year. He was together with other colleagues. He was preparing the publication of the diplomatic cables of the Afghan war logs and all these big scoops by WikiLeaks. And since then, he's working for NDR, which is a public radio in North Germany, and for the Deutsche Zeitung. And he made a few films. Maybe some of you have seen one of his documentaries. I'm happy that he is here. I'm happy that you all are here. And last but not least, we have John Kiriakou, just on the right. If I would find the right paper. Oh, yeah, here we got it. John Kiriakou is a journalist, meanwhile, I have to say, a former CIA counter-terrorism officer, former senior investigator for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and a former counter-terrorism consultant for ABC News. He was responsible for the capture of a high-ranking Al-Qaeda official in 2002. But John Kiriakou decided to blow the whistle on the CIA's torture program, telling ABC News that the CIA tortured prisoners. And he became indicted by the Obama administration under the Espionage Act, served 23 months in jail. As a result of these revelations, John wrote 8 books, if I get it right. And I only quote one, The Reluctant Spy, My Secret Life in the CIA's War on Terror. Thank you all for coming, for traveling quite a distance to Berlin. And let me start our talk with a very short and simple question. When did you come across WikiLeaks, and what did you think about the concept of WikiLeaks when you learned about it? Please.
My first contact with WikiLeaks was actually, I was at Spiegel, and actually my colleague Marcel Rosenbach, who's here, was actually quite aware of WikiLeaks as a phenomenon, and it was, in some ways, he was like the first tech reporter who I knew. And we were given the job actually to go over to London and be in the bunker at The Guardian when the initial Afghan war logs stuff was happening. And I mean, I think there's a point in terms of the meaning of it that I wanted to say, and that was that there's an aspect of WikiLeaks that I don't think that's been talked about up until now, and it has to do with WikiLeaks not just as a platform for leakers, but there's actually a more there's a political thought behind it around this idea of courage is courageous. And if you think of the different models we have of actually changing society, you know, there's kind of parliamentary democracy, there's, I don't know, dictatorships, there's revolution. But the idea of actually transforming the world through leaks, that actually looking at the group of systems operators, like in the world of the internet, and actually politicizing those people, and that there's actually a possibility, and that was at least as I understood it, and in our conversations with Julian at the time, was actually leaking as a way to basically take the air out of power, right? To pop the bubble, right? And not just as like individual leaks, but actually the idea with this courage is courageous, which is why I'm so happy that you're here, right? Is that it would continue. And if you actually look at the trajectory of WikiLeaks, right, you have initially, you have Chelsea Manning, but actually the Snowden leaks are very much as a part of that concept. Okay, I'll shut up, sorry.
Anything else? Anybody else?
I remember exactly what I was doing when the WikiLeaks news hit the news. I was working for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff, and he was so appalled that somebody would leak these classified cables, he called the senior staff together. So we had to meet in his office, and what he wanted was a lot of bobbing heads to say, yes, Senator, this is terrible, this is appalling. And one of the other senior staff members was a journalist, a well-known journalist, two-time Pulitzer Prize nominee. And he says, now wait a minute, before we get ahead of ourselves, it's illegal to classify a crime. It's illegal to classify a criminal act for the purpose of keeping it from the American people. Kerry didn't want to hear that at all. But then I jumped in and I said, but he's right. You can't classify something just because you don't want people to know about it. If there's a video of people being murdered in cold blood, you can say, oh, top secret, got to take that down. It's a crime. There's nothing that makes it top secret or classified in any way. So we ended up arguing easily for 3 hours, and then he told us, just get the hell out of his office. That's what I was doing.
I learned about WikiLeaks. I first heard of them in 2008, but when they were really came just on the map in a big way was with the Collateral Murder video. And that happened to dovetail with Obama indicting Thomas Drake under the Espionage Act for stuff that sounded to me like classic whistleblowing that I myself had engaged in, namely going through internal channels, which didn't work, and then going to the media. And I remember for that, I had been put under criminal investigation for leaking and referred to the bars I belonged to as a lawyer and put on the no-fly list. So when I heard someone was indicted under the Espionage Act, I knew that we had really crossed the Rubicon by unearthing this ancient law and having it applied to someone for whistleblowing activity. And the thing I have to say about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is that when no other news outlet in the country would touch Tom Drake and eventually John Kiriakou and Jeffrey Sterling and Daniel Hale and so many other people I've been honored to represent, WikiLeaks and Julian were there. They were vocal. They called it out. And this is until even recently in Reality Winner's case. And I worked on her advocacy too. And again, WikiLeaks supported whistleblowers. That's what they did. And journalists and people who engaged in dissent. So that was how I learned of them.
Thank you.
So when I was introduced to WikiLeaks, I was inside one of those places that WikiLeaks wanted to get into and let loose the secrets, right? And so the way that I heard about WikiLeaks, unlike a lot of, other folks that I know, was don't touch that. Don't go near that. Don't take that gate when you leave the base, when protesters are out there. Don't do that. And I heard it more and more, especially when Chelsea Manning stepped forward. And they, it was the talk of inside those secret spaces. And this is when part of the campaign to smear him in those spaces was just ongoing. It was pretty ridiculous. And that's what I heard. What I didn't get to hear was things from the other side of that secret wall, because they held, we were pretty much held pretty tightly in that way. And so many of us were just like scared at first to go near it. So.
If I just may add an anecdote, I heard the word WikiLeaks for the first time when I met a hacker in Berlin. And we should, just point out that in the history of WikiLeaks, hackers from Berlin played a quite important role. So an old friend of mine with the Chaos Computer Club came around and said, you're with der Spiegel, you should meet somebody interesting. And I met Daniel Schmidt. He wasn't really Schmidt, he was Domscheit-Berg. And then he chickened out very soon of the whole WikiLeaks project. But when he told me what's the concept of WikiLeaks, I thought, well, for a journalist, the protection of sources is one decisive. Investigative journalism is absolutely decisive. So if you find a possibility that me as a journalist, I can get in contact with informants or with whistleblowers without knowing them, that is the securest way to organize your relationship to informants. So I thought for journalism, that is a quite revolutionary idea. In the end, we found out that many whistleblowers want to have contact with the editors or with the journalists, so it's not so easy. But I thought, oh well, for investigative journalists, this is a very innovative, good idea. And we mentioned already the year 2010 with the Chelsea Manning leaks. Have you any, memories? Did they really have an impact back then? I mean, for us it was shocking. The collateral murder still today is absolutely shocking evidence. But did it have any political influence, the publications? As far as I know, nobody has been put in front of a court because of any WikiLeaks publications. But I don't know if this is right, but what do you think has been the impact of the 2010 publications?
Well, I'm curious what everyone else has to say, but there was when the diplomatic cables came out, right, American diplomacy was paralyzed for several months, right? They literally were going around the world and apologizing for things that they had said to people, had said behind the backs of their partners, right? And so it basically, there's an argument to be made that there were other kind of American adventures that didn't happen at that time because they were paralyzed. So also, if you look at the Afghan war logs and the Iraq war logs, there are also important stories about war crimes. The task force, whatever it was called, 170, whatever, which later has turned out actually has been shown to be really an assassination squad. Those were important stories, and I actually do think they had a big impact.
Wait, do you think that the capacities of the U.S. military or the tactics of the U.S. military in Afghanistan and Iraq has been altered by the publications of WikiLeaks?
I think the diplomacy was paralyzed. I actually really...
Diplomacy, but I'm talking about not about the diplomatic cables, but about the war, Afghani and Iraq war documents.
No.
I agree.
Absolutely not. Not even a little bit, not even a tiny bit. What did happen was something that Daniel Ellsberg used to say, that I was recently talking with Jesselyn about, and that is the courage is contagious. What it did was it showed a route where people could come clean with actions that were happening within their purview that were wrong, that were illegal, that were fraud, that were abuse. Because before WikiLeaks, right, there were ways for certain people who worked in certain places to blow the whistle. There were people in banks who could actually earn money for blowing the whistle, and that was something that people knew. That was common knowledge. But when it comes to national security, when it comes to the things that the state is doing with our tax dollars behind closed doors, if you're someone working in there, it is definitely not obvious how to blow the whistle, how to report a crime safely. And that, that was something that was badly needed at the time. And that you have to say that WikiLeaks came through. They saw a need, they stepped up, they met it, and they started a design pattern that caught on like wildfire. All of a sudden you're hearing about other journalist organizations have one of those drop boxes where you can send things. Like that, to me, from my vantage point, that was amazing. It was something that was very much incredible. And at the time, it was very, very new. And so, definitely credit where credit is due. I mean, that whole process snowballed. And the other thing that happened was the idea of whistleblowing came into conversations, everyday conversations at the coffee table, within the secret spaces where I worked, everywhere. People were using the word whistleblower. I may have heard it once in my lifetime before WikiLeaks, but after WikiLeaks, it became, common verbiage.
Other good things? To WikiLeaks, the Arab Spring was attributed to WikiLeaks revelations. I would say that WikiLeaks also, they pioneered the model for mass digital document leaks on a global level in partnership with other news organizations, and they also pioneered the concept of source protection, encryption, and privacy. And picking up on what Lisa said, to the extent that we now have secure drop and signal and proton mail and Tails and Tor, all of those things, WikiLeaks was at the inception of that. And really, those technologies all have their foundation in things that Julian Assange said we desperately needed and tried to make happen. And, it's a tragedy, the price that he had to pay for basically establishing the ecosystem that we have for journalism now.
May I add, too? I think there's something that's even more important than Chelsea Manning's the release of the diplomatic cables. It came later with the release of the Vault 7 revelations. Joshua Schulte, God bless him, whether he admits it or not, I think is a conversation for another time. But the Vault 7 revelations exposed to the world that the CIA can take control of your car while you're driving it by hacking into the car's computer and send you off of a bridge or into a tree so that it looks like a suicide or an accident, that the CIA can turn on the microphone, or the speaker, rather, of your smart TV, reverse it so that it acts as a microphone, even with the TV appearing to be off, and listen to the conversations in your room. What he revealed to us really came down to matters of life or death. And while it was really cool to read what our State Department people were saying about our diplomatic partners behind their backs, these really were issues of life and death when it came to the Vault 7 revelations. The first thing I did when I saw the Chelsea Manning documents was I searched for myself. And I thought, doggone, that Chelsea Manning released a cable with my social security number in it. I was angry for a little while. And then Ray McGovern said, wait a minute, sure, none of us wants our social security number out there. But there's a bigger issue here. And it was Ray that talked me off the ledge. When Vault 7 came out, I thought, my God, whoever did this did a real public service. This was a life and death public service. And Lisa's correct that in the beginning, it didn't affect things like covert action or covert operations. It was well after, not well after, it was after Chelsea Manning's revelations, for example, that John Brennan started to convene what became known as the Tuesday morning kill list meeting. So WikiLeaks is out there with these cables, and John Brennan still is scheduling meetings on Tuesday mornings at the White House where everybody gets together and they come up with a list of people to kill that week. The teams fan out across the globe, they kill the people on the list, and then they meet up again next Tuesday morning to figure out who they're going to kill that week. That was after WikiLeaks. So there's still a lot more work to do. WikiLeaks was an incredible, like once-in-a-century kind of public service, but there's still more work to do, and more work akin to Vault 7.
But John, let me tell you that when I remember the Vault 7, I did it for Spiegel, I had big problems to convince my colleagues that this is really relevant and it's newsworthy. I think it was more than 20 portions. There were some quite similar sometimes, and I had really, I mean, it was not political objections, but people said, oh, that's not of public interest really, do you think that's for some Secret Service people who are going to study all that, because it's from the CIA, and compared to the public outcry and public impact of the 2010 Chelsea Manning leaks, it wasn't that big. It was a sort of Secret Service story, I would say. But let me ask you: do you think that if whistleblowers are publishing documents from the military, which regards national security, aren't they persecuted much harder than other whistleblowers? That was my impression. That, I mean, you can, well, if you do something about corruption, that's all fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you can get problems. But if it really gets to the U.S. military, I mean, you should know what risks you're taking.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So right now, like, everybody thinks war is all about bullets and bombs. It's all about drones. It's all about these things that kill people. No. What war is really about is money. And some of the things that was put out by WikiLeaks showed us that war was more than bullets and bombs. It showed us about the diplomacy. It showed us about the computer things that John was just talking about. It showed us all of these things. And then what happened was that people's hunger to be able to have knowledge about these things and to be able to see these things changed in a radical way. More people stepped up and started questioning what was going on behind closed doors. Before WikiLeaks, we were all like drones ourselves, walking around and the systems were working. We weren't, in this state of, hyper-normalcy. But after WikiLeaks came out, more people started to question the things that were going on around them. More people started to question where their tax dollars were going. More people started to question, is this idea of a petrodollar and the idea of wars over oil, is this stuff real? And those are the kind of conversations that we need to have, right? Well, I want to see, if I were king or queen for a day, right? If I were to rule the world for one day, what I'd want to see is for people to be able to let truth see the light of day without becoming martyrs. I'd like to see activists hit the street without thinking that going to jail is their only option for publicity. I'd like media outlets to step up and step away from bending the knee to people in power to actually do their freaking job. Because we can bitch all day long about these wars. And we can, try to stand on street corners. We can try to do all of these things about all the, but when push comes to shove, right now, there is an empire that's falling. and scratching the chalkboard, that's the elephant in the room, because the petrodollar is threatened. And the ramifications of that are going to be global. And so these are the kind of things we need people to step up and step out. We need people who work in the tech industry with AI, who understand the fact that we need a whole lot more data and that other countries have that whole lot more data. And, you know, to be able, so that we can have public discourse about what's going to happen next. So that's it.
I was just going to say, since this is about military and whistleblowers, I would be remiss in pointing out that so many of the most consequential whistleblowers in U.S. history have come from the military. So as far back as Daniel Ellsberg and Tony Russo, Ron Ridenour in Vietnam, in the Iraq War, Chelsea Manning, Larry Wilkerson, who I think might be here, Joe Darby, again, all military. Afghanistan War, again, Matthew Ho, Chelsea Manning, Danny Davis. I mean, so many. Like, I was trying to list them all. I'm not going to be able to. And of course, in the War on Terror, drone whistleblowers, and again, also Thomas Drake and Edward Snowden, other people. And I think part of the reason for that is because in the military, unlike most regular Americans, if you're in the military or you're an immigrant, you have to take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. And I think they take that oath seriously. And the second part of that oath that the military take is that you have to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I think because so many people in the military took that oath, they have this higher calling that they have a duty not to the president, not to an agency head, not to a supervisor, not to Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard or any of these other clowns, but to the Constitution and the rule of law. And that is, like, will be one of the few saving graces going on right now. So thank you, people in the military.
I would doubt.
I want to do a quick shout out for Ethan McCord, who saved those children in the collateral murder video. We often forget about him, but the bravery that he displayed in those moments to save those children's lives, incredible.
Jesselyn, I would not object your observation that so many whistleblowers come from the military, but I would say that their cases are just much more in the media. I mean, there are so many whistleblowers in little companies somewhere, never anybody heard of them, and maybe they can change something, and and they don't have these severe consequences. Not every whistleblower ends up in jail quite soon. So I would say, but the most prominent and the most dramatic cases are certainly in the field of military and espionage. We're going to have a panel about that tomorrow.
Yes, but they are the least protected. Corporate whistleblowers have whistleblower protection law. The people who are not protected are people in the US government. Specifically, there is a carve-out for national security and intelligence whistleblowers. And by the way, that laundry list of people, I mean, if we talk about Thomas Drake, John Kiriakou, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Jeff Sterling, reality winner, Daniel Hale, military. But people in the government and military, the protections are much weaker, especially for those doing NatSec and Intel. And the majority of those people I named were doing national security and intelligence work. And to its credit, those were people that WikiLeaks was supporting and defending when no other journalistic outlet in the US would touch them. And I know that because a lot of them were my clients, and we desperately, desperately needed a stamp of journalism rather than journalists calling all of my clients hero or traitor. No, act like a journalist. Don't be a government watchdog and not a government lapdog. And that's what I've tried to say this whole time.
May I add something to that too, Jess?
Sure.
One thing about WikiLeaks, and I think this is a very important thing, is WikiLeaks never got anybody in trouble. You go to something like The Intercept, you might as well walk up to the FBI with your arms outstretched to cuff you, right? We were just talking about this earlier tonight. After the fifth whistleblower was arrested after having communication either with The Intercept or journalists from The Intercept, I tweeted at The Intercept and I said, hey, Intercept, serious question. You guys are an FBI front organization, right? I mean, you must be, or you're so colossally stupid and lazy and bad at your jobs that literally every whistleblower who reaches out to The Intercept ends up in prison. Not with WikiLeaks. Not at all with WikiLeaks. We used to tell people all the time, if you really want to leak national security information for the purpose of blowing the whistle on waste, fraud, abuse, illegality, or threats to the public health or public safety, you got to do it through WikiLeaks because they're the only ones who are going to protect your identity.
I mean, we shouldn't only praise WikiLeaks tonight, though. But I may add one point, which is for me as a historian and a journalist very important, is that WikiLeaks never published a forged document, or it was never proven. And that's something. I mean, if you look at the sheer number of documents WikiLeaks has published, and not one single case, and there might be people trying to get some forged documents to WikiLeaks and get them published. It never happened. So this is quite something. I mean, you must do it. But coming back to my question, is it the military field and the national security which produces the most dangerous and if you look at the other side, the whistleblowers, or is it, what would you say?
So it's incentivization. Bankers and bank-adjacent people are encouraged to blow the whistle to line their pocketbooks. They actually get rewards for doing that. And that is something that Edward Snowden had said, that we have really twisted incentives for doing things, pretty much the entirety of the Western world. And so what I would like to say to any governments out there that happen to be listening, hi y'all, is simply this. If you had a problem with WikiLeaks, fix the problem you have with your internal whistleblowing. Pass legislation that supports whistleblowing. Do those things and you'll never have a problem with journalists again, because it's not the journalist stepping up and telling the truth that is the problem. What the problem is that there are no real safe ways for people to blow the whistle on crime, illegality, fraud, abuse, all of that. There is no, and yet you can do it in a banking system. And the other thing that I want to say is, look out, it's going to change. Because corporations are no longer going to be incentivized, because now they're working. A lot of tech corporations, a lot of, energy corporations, they have now become military adjacent. And they are now part of that huge umbrella that's left unprotected called the national security. And so now we have a period of time when we can think about what strategies we can use to stop this roll. Because it's going to be too late. Right now, the U.S. military is purchasing things using a venture capital model. So, I mean, the writing is on the wall out there. And it's up to people to take the same courage that WikiLeaks showed us so that courage can continue to be contagious.
But what is it? If I listen to Jesselyn Radack, I might get the impression that every Monday a new whistleblower is coming around the corner. But I mean, if we look at the publications of WikiLeaks, the last publication of documents from the military section is in 2018. I still can remember it because I wrote the Spiegel story. That is now 8 years ago. So we have not a proper supply with whistleblower. I think this might be a problem.
Yeah, well, I think the country has become more and more locked down. We have a president that actively, vociferously hates the media and calls the media the enemy of the people. I think also the fact that whistleblowers have continued to be prosecuted at a same or even faster pace each year, and their sentences have gotten longer and harsher. I mean, Daniel Hale was not even sent, at least you got a prison camp, John. Daniel Hale was put in a communications management unit. There are only 2 in the US, and they were built specifically to house terrorists. I mean, think of what message that sent, that the whistleblower is an information terrorist, and that was what they told the court. In reality, Daniel Hale is a pacifist. That was why he was allegedly blowing the whistle on the drone program. And again, don't even get me started on The Intercept. I won't go there. They don't deserve it. But I mean, that's my point. Like, I just feel like we are in such a chilling climate right now. It's hard to advise people to blow the whistle because they see so much proof of I mean, these people who've been made into poster children, including John, including Tom, including Daniel. I mean, the long laundry list of people who've been made an object lesson of what the US government can do to you. And I wish we had a very active WikiLeaks equivalent. I know the model of WikiLeaks has been followed. Certainly, I mean, you look at the Panama Papers and you look at other mass exposures of huge amounts of information. And tech is 2 sides of a coin. Technology makes it easier than ever to leak, but it also makes it easier to get caught.
No, I mean, I think the the idea of WikiLeaks, of the systematic cultivation of leaks as a way of transforming society is an idea that actually is still very much alive, right? And of course the US government has done everything it can to stop that, right? I mean, it's not a surprise, but actually the notion of systematically encouraging and using technology to make it safe for people to do as an idea remains quite sound, right?
And if you're thinking about blowing the whistle, my biggest suggestion, especially if you're from the US, call an attorney.
Oh my God.
Call Jess.
Listen, in all capital letters. This is something that I learned in my own case from Jess. If you're thinking of blowing the whistle, don't say a word until your attorney is sitting in the chair next to you. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive, and you want to protect yourself. Have your lawyer sitting next to you. And remember, another thing I learned from Jess. The morning that I met Jess, it was 4 days after my arrest, and Jess had said something very nice about me in the Washington Post. I was having trouble sleeping, as you might imagine. And so a friend of mine called me at like 6:30 in the morning, and he said, hey, there's a lady in the Post. She said this really nice thing about you, and she's an attorney. You should call her. And I called 6:30 in the morning, and she answers the phone at her desk. And she says, oh my gosh, I didn't know how to get in touch with you. I'm so glad you called. Come into the office. I went into the office. We met for like, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And on the way out, I said to her, I want to really thank you for taking my case because I know that you only represent whistleblowers and I'm not a whistleblower. And you said, you're the poster boy for whistleblowers. And I said, I'm not. I'm just a normal guy who just said something. And it was Jess that taught me that motivation is irrelevant Whistleblowing is the act of bringing to light any evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, illegality, or threats to the public health or public safety. And that has been a mantra for me ever since. It's not up to the Politico.com to decide if you're a whistleblower or not, or the Washington Post, the New York Times. They all have their heads up their asses anyway, excuse my language. But this is something I've come to learn the hard way. You have to trust in your attorneys and trust in WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks is going to get the information out and they're going to protect your identity. Otherwise, do exactly what your lawyer tells you to do.
But come to your lawyer. Talk to a lawyer before you blow the whistle. Unfortunately, people come to me after they blow the whistle and they're being retaliated against by the government. And it's crushing to have the full force of the entire executive branch come down on you. But by then, we're already behind the 8 ball, especially if you're, look, Trump just put another person under, the counterintelligence guy who said, there was no reason, we didn't have any intel that Iran had a nuclear bomb. Well, that guy is now under a leak investigation. And I bet you dollars to donuts that it's under the Espionage Act. And his world of hurt is only just beginning. So again, I encourage people, not just me, there are other whistleblower organizations out there, and many of them are pro bono or low bono or completely free. And if you're thinking about blowing the whistle, it's so dangerous out there now. It's even more dangerous than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I didn't think that could be possible, but it is. Again, longer sentence, harsher sentence, sentences that involve torturous prison conditions, ones that will put you in a terrorist unit. I mean, crazy stuff. Like, talk to a lawyer before you blow the whistle, not after.
But isn't that, what you are saying, isn't that a deterrence for every potential whistleblower? I mean, or isn't the way Julian was treated, the long persecution of Julian, I mean...
I'll qualify that. National security and intelligence whistleblowers in particular.
And I want to say the other thing about WikiLeaks, it's like what they believed in transparency was right across the board. They simply believed in transparency, and what transparency is when you come across a whistleblower to tell them that they need to go see a lawyer, right? Because I can't tell you how many times that journalists had meetings with myself and my friend Sean, and we had meetings with the journalists and all that stuff, and we had to be excruciatingly careful about what we said and didn't say. Because it doesn't make any sense for any of us to have a whistleblower that ends up in prison. It didn't make any sense. It was the saddest thing ever was to see Assange, Julian Assange, rotting. I mean, he was the textbook example of a political prisoner. And so maybe, the next iteration of WikiLeaks that comes across, there's not a person. It's, it's a system.
Well, I have to say also, this made me think, I've always said the war on whistleblowers is a backdoor war on journalists. And there should be no doubt that war is coming in the front door. In the US, we have journalists who are under subpoena in a leak investigation. We have a journalist whose house was just searched pursuant to a leak investigation because she published a story about a contractor who was blowing the whistle on the government. Journalists are more in the crosshairs than ever. So I think it would make sense for all these people, WikiLeaks is not a journalist. That was the worst, most ridiculous thing ever because WikiLeaks was being prosecuted for journalistic activity. It was being prosecuted for protecting a source, maintaining anonymity, using encryption, cultivating a source. These are all things journalists do every day. And publishing classified information. Again, something national security and intel journalists do every day. Yeah. So that was such an artificial distinction, and I felt like the mainstream media and alternative media didn't come on board in realizing that and saying like, oh yeah, I guess we should defend WikiLeaks until the very last moment. But that should have happened 10 years earlier, and it didn't.
Well, nevertheless, as somebody who has been inside a mainstream, quite powerful media, Der Spiegel, in these times, it took me years, I think 3 to 5 years, that I could write a journalist or publisher. They wanted me to write an activist, called Julian Assange an activist. And that also was the case with Reporters Sans Frontières. They first, in the beginning, they said journalism-like activities that they called what WikiLeaks was doing. So it was a struggle also from people inside the media to accept that whistleblowers have to be protected, that they play an important role in the critical journalism. That was quite hard. It was, and as you might know, I'm a journalist since 50 years now. Journalists are don't have that much courage, most of them. So you have to deal with people who, if there are is a political constellation, or if the owner of a newspaper is having this point of view, they see what they should do. So it's.
I realize some journalists, some of them, don't have the courage. But you sure as shit should not burn your source. Those journalists, and I'm not going to say their name because, again, their lawyers will descend upon me because that has happened in the past. But a particular outlet and a particular journalist, a particular outlet has been responsible for sending multiple whistleblowers to prison. And that is shameful, shameful. And
well, what's crazy about, I just remember this thing that went on in Germany for many years, and it was this whole thing, is WikiLeaks, or is Assange an activist, or is he a journalist? And it was just like this kind of, and you never asked the question, is Murdoch an activist or a journalist, right? Like there was like never, ever, or Springer, right? There was never a question, is Springer an Springer as a publishing house activist? And that question was always reserved for WikiLeaks. And you had these like kind of conversations in the editorial rooms I've been in my life that constantly went back and forth, can you actually call him a journalist? And all I remember is actually like with Marcel, we were in this room with the other journalists. Julian is sitting there. We're all looking through the data and we're saying, oh, look what I found, look what I found. We were working together as journalists to analyze the Afghan war logs. That was an act of journalism.
But I think it happened to you as well. I was called an activist because I was supporting WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and the campaign. But then I used to answer, if I am a journalist and I don't defend freedom of press, I just lost it. So, and that's what we were doing, basically, as journalists. We were defending Julian because we thought it is the right to publish certain things the government doesn't like to be published.
What were you accused of, or what kind of criticism did you get?
They sent, when I did interviews with Julian in the embassy in London, they sent some kind of policeman from the editorial staff that I don't fraternize too much, or I don't know. It was ridiculous anyway. But somehow Julian and the whole issue, maybe because the Americans were behind it, in Germany people said, oh, we were very difficult with Julian Assange, and so it was not a very clear understanding that defending freedom of press means defending WikiLeaks. Well,
another thing I just wanted to mention up here, this poor man here is the only one from Europe. We're all from, pretty much. I mean, this is like a lot of times I hear it said that, the U.S. is doing this, the U.S. is doing that. But what Jess was just talking about, journalists being arrested, it's happened in Australia. It's happened in the U.K. So, I mean, while we can look at the U.S. right now and we're doing really poorly, we are not making friends, we suck right now, let's be real, okay? But what happens is it ripples throughout the world. And so, like, all of the stuff that we're saying here, it applies to the Western world. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but It does. And I'm sorry that a lot of it does come out of the U.S. I'm sorry. But we all need to start paying attention to these things. We all need to support, journalism. We all need to support whistleblowers. We all need to support operations like WikiLeaks, and we all need to support, the other thing that's not been mentioned is the gross overclassification of bazillions of documents and things that are just classified to all classification. It's utterly ridiculous. It's like when the US got their first computers, they thought that 3 would be enough for the country. And then they thought, no, that's not enough. And then they started printing documents because they could print documents. And there were like bazillions of documents in the military. And they were so overloaded with documents that they ended up having to buy computers so that they could get rid of all those documents. Well, imagine that whole problem, like feedback loop, happening in the spaces that the rest of the world isn't allowed to see. Because it's there.
Yeah, overclassification continues to be a problem. The U.S. has lost track of how much information it has classified because of the overclassification problem, and it continues. It's only going to continue to get worse. And the process to actually, the government can technically declassify a document. It rarely decides that it needs to do that. It's people fighting through the Freedom of Information Act and other tools and so thank you to all the journalists out there who've been fighting to get stuff declassified, but there's so much stuff that's needlessly classified, and you're not allowed to classify. You can classify to hide sources and methods or conceal undercover identities, but you can't do it, as Lisa said, because the leaks might embarrass you. And a lot of the stuff that's being classified is stuff that luckily it gets out there through leaks, thanks to leaks. And one of the biggest leakers right now, and one of my favorite leakers right now is Pete Hegseth. That dude has leaked more stuff than many whistleblowers and active war plans. To the extent Julian was accused of, leaking stuff about war plans, holy cow, he leaks stuff about an air war action happening. Yeah, on Signal with the journalist in the loop. So there you go. and that wasn't an isolated incident. Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard both have been accused of leaky problems. So,
and neither Hegseth nor the journalist got locked in an embassy. Neither Hegseth nor the journalist got completely prosecuted. Nothing like that happened. So,
yeah, Hegseth. He's under investigation supposedly by the Inspector General, but that will take years and go nowhere. And especially
they fired them.
Oh yeah, they did fire that one. True, they've fired most of the inspectors general. But this is why the Fourth Estate and the press is more important than ever right now, because the press and a few good judges are the only bulwark right now of democracy.
But let's be more specific about that, too. It's mostly the independent press. There's a wonderful journalist, Jason Leopold, at Bloomberg, investigative journalist. George W. Bush's Pentagon spokesman called him a FOIA terrorist because he has filed more Freedom of Information Act requests than any other person on the planet Earth. And he told me once that he was bored one year over Christmas break, and so he dashed off a Freedom of Information Act request to the CIA for every communication between the CIA and an American journalist for the previous year. Period. And what he does, he still does it now that he's with Bloomberg, he has a lawyer friend who sues the CIA. The law is clear. The CIA has 60 days to respond. You'll be lucky if they respond in 60 years. So he sues on day 61, and he always wins because the law is clear, and the CIA always has to pay his legal fees because he won. So he does this over Christmas, and he gets thousands of pages of documents, but they include a couple of gold nuggets. One of them showed that Ken Delanian, who is the chief national security correspondent for NBC News and what was called MSNBC, was writing his articles and sending them to the CIA for clearance before sending them to his own editors. Is this okay with you guys if I say this? Because if it's not okay, I'll just take it out. So just let me know. Another thing that he found was there was a young, hungry, independent journalist who actually found a scoop and wrote to the CIA and said, I'm going to print this tomorrow. Do you have any comment? And they responded, and they said, so help us God, if you print this tomorrow, you will never be invited to the CIA Christmas party ever again. That's what they said. And we will never give you any background briefings. And he killed his own story. But we would never know any of this if it wasn't for good, independent journalists, fearless journalists like Jason Leopold, and journalists that rely on WikiLeaks for some of those leads that they can then dig into. Because the mainstream media is not going to do it. It's not going to be in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal or CNN or Fox or anywhere else. It's just not going to appear.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have to remember that the initial WikiLeaks, material from 2010 did run in the New York Times, did run in the Guardian, and did run in Spiegel, right? I mean, that was the,
Le Monde and El País as well. Le Monde and El País as well later.
Right. I mean, that it did happen.
I don't know. We are not all journalists here, but if you talk about this kind of tactical relationships towards Secret Service, I can remember that Edward Snowden, in the midst of a really difficult production, asked us to confront the GSA HQ with the facts in our story. And we thought it couldn't be. We always could do it without confrontation, but he insisted on that. But it went nowhere because these secret services, they want to ask, what's the color of the hair of your colleague who's working with, or what's the size of her shoes and stuff. They ask you a lot. They want to know everything, and they won't tell you nothing. Just give you this statement which you can put on your wall and take every time that you quote a secret service. So it can be tactical. It can make sense to talk with Secret Service people. I just had a good laugh with them sometimes, and but this is journalist talk. I would get it back into the political realm and about WikiLeaks. When we look in the future, and we all wish, I think, that WikiLeaks would be reborn. I mean, it doesn't really exist as if you look at the website, there hasn't been things published. So we all hope that it will be reborn. I'm asking myself, after Daniel Ellsberg said, I've been waiting for Chelsea Manning for, was it 40 or 50 years? We don't have that many whistleblowers. I mean, John, you know what happened to a whistleblower? Just yourself. I mean, it is a risky job. I mean, there are organizations, luckily, and attorneys and lawyers who support whistleblowers. But I don't know how we can create more whistleblowers. I mean, politically, it would make a lot of sense, but how to do it?
I think you need to have better whistleblower protection, and Chip Gibbons, who was on the panel earlier, has been working on an act to reform the Espionage Act in a way that would protect whistleblowers, protect journalists, create a public interest defense so you could actually say in court at trial that I did this. I blew the whistle because what I saw was wrong and people were dying because of it. Right now, you can't make that argument until sentencing after you've already been found guilty.
But if you murder somebody, but if you kill somebody in cold blood, standing outside a building, you can make that argument every day and twice on Sundays.
And to make it even more difficult, if you plead guilty to a lesser charge, you are forbidden by law from ever launching an appeal or filing a Freedom of Information Act request on your own case. Can't do it.
Yeah, and then you come out and you have a criminal record, and it complicates your life for the rest of your life, as John knows, as Daniel knows. Yeah, it's a terrible situation. I mean,
whistleblower is an American word, but it looks like, or it sounds like what you are telling tonight, that the situation of whistleblowers in the United States is much worse than many other countries. Is that true?
Don't forget Katharine Gun. Yeah. Look what happened to her in the UK. Yeah. And she contemporaneously said, hey, this is what's happening with the war in Iraq, before the war started. And it went nowhere, but her life has forever changed.
I think it's gotten worse. The situation for whistleblowers, as bad as it was, when Obama, under Obama, the transparency president, by indicting Tom Drake, I mean, it just set off what I thought it was a one-off, but unfortunately it's become completely normalized at this point. Like I said, the news yesterday that another guy is being investigated by the FBI for a leak because he said something that was dissent, not because I think they were saying he revealed classified information, but they always say that, and a number of times that turns out not to be true. It is normalized to use the Espionage Act, and so unless we do something like Chip is working on and repeal the Espionage Act, I don't see an end to this. I mean, the government has found a loaded gun, a very useful tool that it can use, and the defendant is not allowed to mount a defense. And the proceeding will take place largely in secret because of classification, even if stuff was unclassified. In Thomas Drake's case, all the information at issue turned out to be completely unclassified. And yet, all of these proceedings were taking place in a Classified Information Procedure Act hearings, in a SCIF, in a Kafkaesque secret lockdown situation. Same with Daniel Hale, my own client. Even in an open court session, his lawyer, one of his lawyers, was shut out, even though they were not discussing classified. Is that constitutionally challengeable? Maybe, but by then the horses left the barn and the client's already in prison. We really need to rein in Computer Fraud Abuse Act, the Espionage Act, and these laws that are being used largely against whistleblowers and journalists, and not against people who are actually committing what we think of as saboteur or spy conduct.
So before we take questions of the audience, maybe a last question from me and for all of you. If you could look into the future, what would you wish WikiLeaks would be in, let's say, 10 years' time?
I would love to see it active again, but I also, given what WikiLeaks went through, which was literally this campaign by one of the most powerful countries in the world, including attempts and designs to assassinate Julian Assange, I get why they're not reconstituting. I think we're in a very chilling environment, and I don't know if as much as I would like to see WikiLeaks or a similar type organization exist, I don't think it would. I think the government would quickly label it a terrorist, label its editor-in-chief or publisher a terrorist, get them blacklisted, financial blockades, all the stuff that happened to WikiLeaks, but now on steroids, because I don't recognize the country I was born in, the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree. The only way that not just the American people, but any people are going to know about government malfeasance is through WikiLeaks. We need a robust, healthy, and well-funded WikiLeaks. It's the only way to keep the honest people honest.
I just don't know if that can happen given this climate. I mean, it would have to be run out of another country for sure. and anyone from the U.S. who's cooperating with it, as we have seen, including people who were not part of WikiLeaks. Again, it's an incredibly dangerous environment in which reporters, and not just sources now, but reporters, and even people who are just war protesters, have been put in jail at an astonishing number.
That's true in the U.S. What I would like to see, if I were queen for a day, is that journalism such as what WikiLeaks did be legal, period. I would like to call what WikiLeaks did journalism. And be done with all of this BS where power just crushes people's voice, period. Because I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but I am incredibly sick of having to do what Daniel Ellsberg said in National Bird. He said, I've always walking around and I got to watch my words. I always got to watch my words. And it's like, I know all of us who came here from the U.S. are thinking, what are we going to do at the airport? How are we going to get in? How much are we going to be searched? I am sick of that shit. So, like, you know.
My mantra is, you cannot stop me from re-entering my own country. And that's the end of the conversation. Maybe you sit there for 45 minutes. One time I sat there for 4 hours. But every single time they would say, let me see your phone, let me see your laptop, I would say, not without a warrant, and you can't stop me from re-entering my own country. And then finally they say, just get the hell out of here.
Well, that problem was just solved.
I mean, just as a journalist, I would love to get leaks and material and documents and publish them. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, please, any questions to all of us? Anybody here on stage? I can't see properly.
Yes, on the right.
Middle, yeah.
There's a lady on the right here.
Yeah, okay, then. Okay.
Thanks. It's been fascinating to see in real life rather than on a little screen. I have a question. Some things have changed since 2010. In 2010, we needed collateral murder or the release of Philip Alston's cable, which helped remove immunity from American soldiers in Iraq, to sensitize people. We needed WikiLeaks' information about the 789 men tortured, Muslim men tortured at Guantánamo. Now we're having the live streaming of a genocide by very courageous journalists talking about courageous journalists in Gaza. We're also having quite a lot of information. But the things which are special about WikiLeaks, which were courage, ingenuity, purpose, public spiritedness, where are you seeing one or more of those today?
That's easy. Wherever the U.S. is oppressing a country. Palestine, those journalists facing life and death, getting the truth out there. The people who are filming inside of, the camps that are in the U.S., holding people who were illegally in the country, which, everyday citizens who get online and they're all over in the streets blowing whistles and following ICE. That's where we see it. What we don't see is more people standing up for them, because we have to fight back in numbers. If we don't have those numbers, we lose before we ever start. And so, for people who, free Palestine, man, free Palestine, right? And what about the genocides going on in Africa? What about, there are so many countries that are being oppressed, and there are so many people who are trying to stand up with their very lives, like my heart goes out to them because they don't have the privilege that I have as a white woman in this world.
Yeah, who was next? Oh. Yeah, maybe in the middle, yep.
Yeah, thank you very much for this talk. It was really inspiring, but unfortunately tomorrow we will wake up and we will have our shitty German journal again. So I'm talking about all the journals that we know. I do not have to cite them one by one, but even looking outside of the German countries, we will have Italian journals, or in France, or in Spain. And to me, to reconnect to what she was saying, it's sad to say, but honestly, it's difficult to see the impact of WikiLeaks now in our journal. And I'm talking about the mainstream journal. So you were saying before that we need more whistleblower, and some of you say that we need more journalists with courage. I think that the main problem is publisher, especially talking in this country, and maybe some of the journalists in the panel can tell us something more about it. But my question is, how do you think this problem can be solved? So we have a platform, we have whistleblower, we have journalists. Actually, there are journalists with some courage, but those journalists, they do not get a job. It's really difficult for good journalists to find a job. And so this is why we have publishers that they have really crappy journalists, especially when it is about international politics. I'm looking at Germany right now, but this discussion can be extended outside of the country. So my question is, how can the publisher landscape be changed, in your opinion? Thanks.
John, would you like, I mean, you're a journalist, I'm also a journalist, would you like to say something about the publisher? Because my impression is different. I think at the moment, if you have got some documents about US war crimes, they would be published here easily, because, I mean, the relationship between Germany and the US government, the current US government, so strained that no German publisher would. It's something different with Gaza. Gaza is a complete other story, which has to do with the German past. But American documents, there is no publisher who's not giving a good journalist a job, or who will say, we don't work with these documents. I don't see that like that. But John,
No, I agree. I mean, I think right now the atmosphere is very much. I mean, I think one of the issues that you see in German journalism is that counter narrative, which is the kind of the traditional, field of investigative journalism that kind of takes current affairs and actually looks at the narrative from a different point of view. In Germany, a lot of editorial staffs are really worried that that's the realm of the AfD, right? And if you come with a counter-narrative proposal, right, they don't distinguish between, I don't know if you want to say left-wing or kind of, critical counter-narrative and AfD counter-narrative, and you see these editorial people like very confused and worried about, oh my God, is this going to help Russia? Is this going to help the AfD? Is this going to be? And so they stay very centrist because they're worried about kind of the broader implications of it. That's what I experience, put it that way.
There was someone in the first panel asking or making this comment about the fact that the internet is somewhat of a cesspool now, and the digital communications are really problematic, that we're not necessarily going to be able to operate with another kind of WikiLeaks. I hope that there are ways, but in case that we need to look at other things, I think it's important maybe to think about for this whole conference, maybe not to be so media and data-centric, and to think about ways of resistance in other forms, because we have enough information to know we're being ruled by corrupt bastards and people who are doing war crimes and things like that. Recently, Andrew Feinstein was here to speak. on a panel, and he was speaking about the multiple factors that brought down apartheid in South Africa. And so the other really important key things are, popular uprising, divestment from in academics with military-industrial complex things, and other factors. But this multiplicity of things that happen in a confluence are the things that can topple the power. But if we just keep looking for more information, we're just going to drown in it. So I'm wondering, was the internet anyway, in some sense, always military-industrial complex, and we were not really looking in the right direction to liberate ourselves through the technological tools of the master? What do you think about that angle?
So I have something very critical to say. Get off Google. Because like all the people that are doing all these other things that are brilliant, they are communicating with Gmail. So to come back to the wish for WikiLeaks and the folks around WikiLeaks, please create another Google so that activists can communicate. There's been several people who have tried to put that forward and tried to do that, and they've all failed. There's been a lot of grift in that arena, but we need something else because the problems are now global. So we're going to need to be communicating with the technology, and all technology is dual use. Has it always been a tool? Well, yeah, the U.S. military pretty much invented it. The CIA got on board, So has it always been military? Yeah. But, so have Jeeps, and so have many things that we use. So we can use this effectively, we can use technology effectively, but we need to find alternatives. Like Meredith Whittaker is trying to come up with a new business model for Signal. And what she's doing is working. Proton Mail is trying to have a new business model, but as some of you may or may not know, because of intergovernmental agreements, Proton Mail was compromised by an intergovernmental agreement where they were able to get the information of who was communicating with who. So, we need to find other alternatives to be able to communicate, to let these things flourish.
But I agree, you need multiple tools in your toolkit, and they should go beyond just communication. We need boots on the ground in the street, march and protest, go to Parliament, go to your legislatures, and lobby for things like Chip has been championing, trying to end the Espionage Act. Take a multi-pronged approach, play to your strength, whatever your strength is. If you're a lawyer, if you're a journalist, whatever your strength is, use that to fight this. But also, people in the streets matter, organized protests matter. That was an essential, and Stella talked about this. The protests, the organic protests that sprung up all over not only the US, but the world in support of Assange. And everyone did it kind of differently, but you still had all of these different arenas of protest. And it really was horseshoe politics, because you had very liberal people, very conservative people, libertarians. You just had people of all political stripes realizing that what was affecting and what was coming down on WikiLeaks could easily rain down on them. And it took that kind of continued, persistent, vocal solidarity. And it was a grind over many, many, many years. Again, the persecution of Julian was not just Belmarsh. It had started so much longer before. And I think a lot of people don't quite realize how much of Julian's life was spent in some kind of confinement situation before Belmarsh and before the embassy. How much of his own life had been sacrificed for transparency. So we need to carry that forward.
I mean, and let's also not forget that there was a lot of people who went to jail who were not named Julian Assange, having to do with WikiLeaks, right? You know, Ola Binney, right? You know, Schulte, as you mentioned. I think Jeremy Hammond is, and also the people who basically refused to give states evidence against WikiLeaks, who basically also got criminalized and had criminal prosecutions or threatening letters or whatever, and basically were forced to live outside of the United States. So I mean, sure, the focus of course was on Assange, and of course it was right to try to get him out. But I'm saying it's amazing actually how many people were actually hit with that state repression.
Yes, last question or questions back there. All the way back.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to follow up on the question of what is there left to whistleblow if there is a genocide that is live streamed. And my question is there anything left to scandalize? I hate to be fatalistic, but it crossed my mind, and I want to know if you we can scandalize if there is a desire for truth, right? If there is something that we can say that is a scandal. So we see now with the war on Iran and on Lebanon, we don't know, one day it is this reason, the other day it is that reason. Would there be in the current war any tipping point case, any question that we could scandalize to actually say, yes, this would be a problem for them to continue the war? Because they're quite vocal that they're doing this wars just for this. So they're breaking the law. Yes, we're breaking the law. So they're doing actually criminal things, and they're admitting it themselves. So my question is really, yes, is there anything we can scandalize when Trump says the only law is my moral judgment?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, to the extent this war is meant to distract, and unfortunately seems to have successfully distracted Americans from focusing on the Epstein scandal, which potentially, if we actually had access to the documents, and if we ever needed WikiLeaks or an organization like WikiLeaks, it would be for the Epstein files. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that? All of it. Not the redacted version, not the sanitized version, not the version that's protecting, in Trump's words, all of my friends. That would be an amazing thing to leak. Remember when WikiLeaks created the list of documents that it wanted to be leaked? That was important. I could come up with a list of those documents, but again, I don't see the public clamoring or making the connection that that is precisely the kind of mass trove of data that WikiLeaks was able to get out there in pristine form, in the form in which it was written, without government redactions and blank pages.
I just want to respond directly to you. I actually think what definitely is, would be a scandal, would be journalistically really relevant right now, would be secret treaties between Gulf states and the United States and Israel. I think internal documents from Egypt right now about the agreements about the border with Gaza, agreements between Israel and Egypt would be highly interesting right now. I mean, I think the material about the anti-missile defense systems and how they've been moved around. I think also, we're in Germany right now. what did Germany know about the war before? What is Germany doing actually right now? Because we have a history of situations where Germany has once, has said publicly, for example, with the Iraq War, we're not going to participate. And in the end, they ended up doing targeting for the United States military in Baghdad, right? I mean, even though the population wasn't aware of that. So I think there's a lot of stuff right now that would be really interesting to hear about. Also, any note-taking between conversations with Netanyahu and Trump, I mean, that stuff's out there. It would be great to get, and I actually think it would scandalize people.
There are also people online with questions.
Yeah, there was one here, first row, and then this one, and then we go to the online questions.
So intelligence agencies themselves have largely been shifting their center of gravity towards open source intelligence. When WikiLeaks released the Kissinger cables, there was a lot of confusion from the press of, oh, do you just do open information now, or are you done with leaks? The point was made, no, the point is the analysis, like what you learn, not the methodology. And so I think obviously techniques for analyzing broader sources of information. There was reference to live stream genocide. You can find this all on Instagram. Like, what do you view as the role of evolving into the world of broader forms of intelligence, and let's say open source intelligence of WikiLeaks as the center of gravity now?
And that's basically a question to WikiLeaks, which is sitting in the first row, not very far from you. And just let me make one point. I think we just touched certain questions. What's going to be with WikiLeaks? Will there be a new organization and so on? And I hope very much that we're going to discuss these questions tomorrow and the next days, because I think I've never met such intense, or such a big number of former WikiLeaks, still WikiLeaks, friends of WikiLeaks, supporting WikiLeaks, lawyers, and so on. So we're going to talk about that in the next days. To your question, to be honest,
I'd like to say something about your question. Fine. I think that all of us need to learn a little bit of open source intelligence so that we can dig through the plethora of garbage that's now online and find, the actual truth of things. And the other thing is, it would be great if there was a repository like WikiLeaks for open source information, for any information, because, it's just like with whistleblowing, the messenger doesn't matter, it's the message. And so in this case, the method doesn't matter. It's still the message that's important, and how we get it out there to the public, and how we, make it in a way that the general public eat in bite-sized chunks so the general public can understand it. I don't know, did that work?
So there was one last question online. Over there, and then we go.
Hi, just building up on what was said till now. We had the WikiLeaks coming out, all the cables, and but the net effect is that then Trump got elected. I think the fact that it didn't really change the mind of people, that when we are whistleblowing, coming out with scoops, we see that doesn't affect the public opinion. I mean, we have a problem on this. Now, to the point that the criminals are making selfies while they commit a genocide, and that makes our job, I'm a reporter myself, very difficult. What can I say more? When they kill, how many are they now? I don't know, 50,000. It doesn't matter anymore, the number of kids, of children killed in Gaza. When they carpet bomb Tehran without any reason, how can we do more than this? If people doesn't rise out of these elements that are very clear to everybody, what can really make them rise up? This is my fear, that we are lobotomized, that the people doesn't really have the capacity of react to such. They flooded us, as Bannon liked to say, they flooded us with so much shit that we don't even realize what is going on. This is why it becomes, I'm sorry, irrelevant sometimes to
What's
come
your
out
question?
with it. So the question is maybe it's a political problem. So it's not just a journalistic problem, but there is a political. You were saying before that there is not. We are trying not to be political, but maybe here is a big political problem that cannot be resolved only by journalism.
I mean, nothing can be solved only by journalists. I'm very sure as a journalist, but I have the impression that war creates a lot of horrible things, but it also creates whistleblowers. If I look at the work of the Plus 972, which is an Israeli internet platform, they had quite a few really interesting whistleblowers from the IDF. So I think we're going to see, and especially about this revolution of introducing AI into modern warfare. Some stuff was already coming out, and I think we're going to hear and read and see from this kind of information quite frequently in the future. So in that way, I'm optimistic. What that causes, or what political impact that has on societies, and on the political actions or non-action is another question.
I'm working with the AI Whistleblower Initiative on whistleblower protections for AI. And if you haven't noticed, there have been a huge number of whistleblowers in AI, which is sort of the new frontier. To me, it's what cybersecurity was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and now AI. But the people who've been blowing the whistle on AI are a lot of people at the top. And they've been doing so by resigning, and resigning loudly, and talking about problems with the technology. So that gives me, just to end this with like a little tiny glimmer of hope.
All right, now questions from the famous internet. Who has them?
Yes. How can military whistleblowing continue to feel impactful in a climate of engineered distrust, learned helplessness, and the normalization of atrocities? Case in point, the genocide in Gaza. And how do we convince potential whistleblowers and the public that people are actually held accountable as a result of leaks?
I mean, I don't know that there's an answer to that question anywhere, but I do know that something that Edward Snowden said rings true to me, and it's that we need to change the incentivizations that we have. And like one of the things that we're doing with this political quagmire that we're in is that we're not able to work together. And sometimes even from the polar left and the polar right, I mean, polar opposite people, it's something that was said at the first panel about it being a really long process and finding ways that we can work together on a single goal. And I think a lot of, and it's really hard because, it's like people are not, they're so, I don't know if it's self-censoring or censored, that we're not even, shall I say, allowed to say that that was a genocide. It was a flippin' damn genocide, and it's still going on. And so I think one of the other things that we need to do is just shout that stuff from the rooftops. I don't know how to break, this apathy, this hopelessness, it's like this is what trauma does, and right now we have entire nations in trauma.
Thanks. Are there any more questions? I would say the last questions. Not. Yeah, up there. Oh, sorry. It's the lights. Could somebody get a mic up there? We completely neglected the upper floor.
Okay, thank you for your remarkable work as whistleblowers, first of all. I wanted just to bring the attention to like what we just talked, like what is the point of a whistleblower if then we don't do anything with it? Like, in the sense, for example, like setting the tone of, like, it seems like the tone that was set in this conversation was very reformist, in the sense of, like, how can we, for example, lay hope in the US government to reform an act like the Espionage Act, and then be like, okay, the US government will protect now whistleblowers. Like, or for example, now when like the question previous to the last question was asked, like when we talk about activism, when we talk about like how like we should also focus on like what is actually like the counter, like the parallel channel to the institutional channel, because it cannot just be journalism for the sake of journalism, and it cannot just be we cannot just hope that like the perpetrator becomes the protector. So how do you envision this? Do you think that like WikiLeaks have like more of the purpose of like just blowing the whistle, or in order to make it congruous with the fight and the struggle in the world, actually you should have like a political meaning in the sense of connecting with this activism? Thank you.
I mean, there was another trajectory for WikiLeaks after 2010, and that was that it would become an NGO that would get American government financing and basically become a lame operation, right? I mean, that was one possibility that WikiLeaks could have gone in. And, you know, and I think it's a real credit to Assange, actually, himself, that WikiLeaks remained an organization that openly violated, you know, I mean, didn't ask for permission to do anything and didn't wait for a law to get changed. It was actually, as in its concept, outside of that, and was not begging for permission to do things. And I think that's why it stayed such a strong organization and didn't become yet another NGO.
Well,
it was a journalistic organization too. I mean, I still think that there are journalists that need to step up and freaking tell the truth and use the word fascism. Use the words matter. Like, use the word genocide. Use the words, you know, slaughter. Use the words imperialism. I mean, words matter. And as long as we keep like relegating war to business-like terms, and relegating like some of the worst things that humankind does into like organizational, transactional terms, then we're just going to remain in this kind of lethargy.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jesselyn. Thank you, John. I think you were great apparently, because I mean it's sometimes depressing and very serious a topic we were talking about, but sometimes I could even have a good laugh about certain anecdotes and about certain remarks. I hope you will come back tomorrow, because I mean all these questions about WikiLeaks should be discussed by people who are closer to WikiLeaks or who are WikiLeaks, and I'm looking forward to listen to these discussions tomorrow. Have a good evening. Have a
And we can actually continue talking if you want. We will all go eat and drink at the restaurant of How, which is at Hallisches Ufer 34 at the Parallelstraße, the parallel street. So we can still continue there. Thank you. You're invited.